Well, it's really great to have you on the show, No Name. Can you start by introducing yourselves? You don't really need an introduction, but how do you like to be introduced, and what do you want people to know about you?
What do I want people to know? Well, I perform under the name No Name. I'm Fatima. Most folks in the real world call me Fatima. I am a young person trying to navigate the world and gain better understanding. I think I do that through music, but also just things like this, just having conversations with folks. That's, I think, really important for people to know about me is that I'm in the process of learning about a lot of the structuring of society from a political standpoint, how our worlds are governed. I'm just now coming into uh, this, I don't know what you would call it, this history and more specifically like learning about the Black radical tradition. So
Hmm.
long ass intro, but yeah, I'm a
No,
rapper.
no.
I created a book club. That's me.
Yeah, let's talk about the book club, but also I'm curious to know, what was it like? I can pinpoint in my life the moment in time where I became like politicized. And for you, what was that moment for you?
Um, well, public shaming, if I'm being honest. I think growing up as a person of color in a city like Chicago, and more specifically a Black person, um, you're already a little, I guess, politicized, and maybe not in the way of having the theory and being fully, radicalized into a specific, um, like politic, or if you're gonna be leaning towards the left or the right or that kind of thing. But yeah, I think I just just navigating that city, the world around me, um, being young and seeing how Black folks were treated, sort of politicized me early on. But I think I wasn't fully, and I still don't know if I'm like quote unquote fully radicalized, but
Hmm.
that more so happened online, a couple misguided tweets a while back, and yeah, it led me down a journey of reading and trying to discover what it was I was wrong about, and why, and how can I be better, how can I just use my platform to just not push any sort of misinformation.
Hmm.
Um, I think is pretty important to me. So, yeah, I think it's an ongoing journey though. I could never I think every day I wake up and I'm learning something new, and I'm becoming more and more quote unquote radicalized, politicized, you know.
Yeah, one thing I've appreciated about, to be honest, this is full disclosure. I thought you were just somebody who was very political on Twitter, and then I discovered your music. So I discovered you via your tweets before, and I was like, this is me like revealing how like out of touch I am with the world. At least like pop culture and like those kinds of things. And I was like, hey, this person, No Name, do you follow them on Twitter? Like they have all this like amazing reading lit. Like they're always like really kind of poignant like tweets, and they're like, yeah, do you ever listen to their music? I was like, wait, they have music.
Yeah, yeah. I find a lot of people recently who have been following me are following me for the tweets, which is really interesting and new because I'm not like I've always used my Twitter for music promotion.
Mm,
Like being an artist, that's the only I was never political on my platform. So for people to now be interested in my politics is really, I don't know, it's a little uncomfortable because now academics are starting to follow me and I'm like, please don't follow me. I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. But yeah, it's cool, I guess. It is a lot of pressure because there's not really space to get it wrong. I feel like online, everything is so polarizing, and especially when people when they like your takes or whatever, I think it puts you in a peculiar position where you always have to be I don't want to say right, but kind of.
yeah.
Um, So gives me a lot of anxiety. That's why I'm like, I'm taking a break for a little while. I need to do some more reading myself, a lot more.
No, it's I totally feel you on that somebody was pointing this out to me because like, I'm 34. I don't think I'm that old, but like I didn't grow up with Twitter like as a high school student. I didn't grow up with, Facebook even. And, one thing that I noticed about, because I work with a lot of younger native folks. And one of the things, like social media is incredibly important and it structures their social world. And it also distorts it in many ways because they post one thing on there and they have to live with it the rest of their life because there's a
Forever.
permanent, yeah, there's a permanent record about it. And, that's why I really appreciate your transparency and honesty about like being always in development. And I think that is a very in my in my estimation, it's a very mature thing to admit that like that we don't know things going into them like what the correct answers are, but we're trying to develop politically the best way to navigate these situations. And I think that's a the honesty that we're kind of missing because I want people to change. I don't want to be the person I was 10 years ago.
Right. Definitely want to continue to grow. So yeah, it's nice to be outside of that forum and to have spaces like this where you can get a bit more nuance than I think, however many characters tweets allow. And now they added this new feature where you can be selective about who can reply to your tweets. Which part of me is in love with that, but also I'm like, is this democratic? Like this is kind of fucked up. Like isn't this supposed to be an open forum kind of thing? So that is interesting, but yeah, I want to be able to have with the book club we were able to read, books around racial issues and capitalism, imperialism, that kind of thing, and talk and engage in person. But with COVID, it's that's completely dead. So
Mm.
I've missed that a little bit because I didn't like go to college or anything, so I think a part of me just longs for that level of just dialogue, like
Mm.
like specifically around politics and philosophy. I didn't really get that, so it's nice to be able to come and have those sorts of open conversations with strangers, even.
And so, which of the books in that list that you've read so far, like, was like a game changer? Because I can pick a book that I read as a young person that really advanced my politics and ways of thinking about the world. But which book, if you can pick one or two, or maybe like ones that really stuck out to you? Because I see ones that are like my favorites, like a lot of books from the Pan Africanist tradition, like Walter Rodney, and then also like folks like Angela Davis. But which one for you is like a standout book?
I really love George Jackson's Blood in My Eye.
Mm,
I had never read anything from Political Prisoner before, and so I think usually when people ask me this, I always say pedagogy of the is it pedagogy or pedagogy? I always say that
I
wrong.
don't know. It's I still okay. So this is a full admission. Like I grew up in like a very like poor environment, so I would read things, but I would never hear those words out loud, like hegemony or hegemony or like pedagogy or pedagogy. So
Right,
I
right. That's
I
yeah.
I have a PhD and I still mispronounce all that stuff. So
Okay, so I don't feel too bad. That was one of the ones that led me down the journey and opened my eyes a lot to just the idea of what it means to be oppressed, what it means to be like, a colonized subject in the world.
Mm,
But I think the blood in my eye, I don't know, it's just very unapologetic and angry, and his theories about imperialism and capitalism really, I think, just spoke to me, especially since he, was incarcerated when he was studying and doing a lot of his organizing work. And I just thought that I just never thought about someone who was incarcerated having that level of autonomy, even from within such a brutal system to still be organizing on behalf of like all oppressed peoples in the quote unquote free world. I don't know, something about that just was like, damn, you really fucking care.
Yeah.
Like this is crazy. Cause here I am sitting in the comfort of my own home and shit, and I'm not putting in half the mental work, and just as dedicated to liberation as he was. So reading that definitely, um, it was really inspiring and really motivating and encouraging to just be like, okay, I need to do more. There's more that I really need to do. I
Yeah.
don't know if that makes sense, but
No, no, it does perfectly. And for those of you who don't know who George Jackson is, he was a member of the Black Panther Party. He was also incarcerated at the time. I think he was incarcerated when he was like 18 or 19,
mhm.
and it was like petty theft or something. But they kept like piling on, different charges, things that he would do inside, and he was known as a prison organizer, and really was like kind of on the inside, and he's not as well remembered, I would say, than like compared to people like Huey Newton, or even Angela Davis, but nonetheless was integral to the organizing of the Black Panther Party inside of the prison system, but also himself an abolitionist. And like you said, like he has a clarity and a sobriety
Yeah.
around the way that he writes, that he doesn't mince words.
Yeah, no, it's very, very straight to the point. um,
Mhm.
but it is a lot of theory. So I learned a lot reading his book. I definitely learned a lot. I wanted to also read some of like the Soledad brothers, like the letters between him and his brother.
Mm,
Um, but I think they gave him like a 1 year to life sentence or something crazy like that.
right.
Just fucking oh, sorry, can you curse on here? Can I
Yeah,
curse?
it's fine.
Okay, yeah, yeah. Just like completely dehumanizing and just, disgusting. And even like I think folks are even more familiar with like Lumia
Mm,
even more so than like a George Jackson. But I feel like his work it informs so many other revolutionaries even after him, folks who were in the academy and just folks who were organizing on the ground in the world. Yeah, I definitely would highly recommend that book. That book was very spicy. Very
that-
spicy. He was ready to burn shit. He was ready. He was
yeah.
like, "Oh, I know exactly what we need to do." Also, another thing about reading that book, it's a very like almost revolutionary tactical hand guide kind of thing. And thinking about a lot of the tactics that he was talking about and compared to the time that we're in, I don't know, it's really interesting because I think now with the level of like militarization, I don't know that that type of a revolution is possible, like in the
Mm,
way that it could have been in the 70s on like a combatant against the state kind of thing,
yeah.
like the physical violence of it. Also, that was another thing that I really loved about him and about The Wretched of the Earth, which is another one that was like really important to me, is just the conversation around violence.
Mm,
Um, I don't know why folks don't like to talk about violence.
yeah.
I mean, I get it. It's violence. It's not a topical point of discussion, but I think it is interesting that we don't talk about it more when the state is so inherently violent. I don't know
Mm,
why for us as, I guess the oppressed, like why like even just looking at how people were talking about the looting and
mm,
the some of the protests, some police cars got burnt or maybe even a police precinct, and just the public's response to that type of violence in comparison to the violence of the carceral state always
mm,
is just really fascinating to me. How we can have, it's almost like, what is it, cognitive dissonance or something
mm,
like. So yeah, so the fact that he spoke so clearly about that in his book and also Fanon as well definitely opened up different pathways of thinking for me. I don't consider myself a violent person, but
yeah.
I'm not opposed to protecting myself if I need to.
And I think that's the core of what makes the United States the United States. If you just read the Declaration of Independence, there's one paragraph or there's one section of it, when Thomas Jefferson was writing it, and he was writing out the litanies of all the things that the king, or the crown had done to the Euro American, colonists.
Mm,
And one of them was, inciting domestic rebellions among us. And what he meant by that was inciting, slave revolts. And, this was happening in the Caribbean at the time, where the British crown, was moving towards abolition, not because, they had some kind of sense of like
like
altruism towards,
moral, right?
yeah, it's because people were like kicking the shit out of them. And then in that same paragraph, he says, "And the merciless Indian savages on our frontier, whose only known warfare is like, brutal, killing children and women and all these things."
Hmm.
And so, in that founding document, is the fear of, the great replacement, or this fear of a counter annihilation. This idea that we have to do to them what they're going to do to us, right?
Right.
And that's annihilate us and throw, like to kill us. And so when we talk about anything, when it's self-defense, they're always going to turn self-defense or resistance into a criminal act, no matter what you do. And so this idea around this cult, I call it a cult, the cult of nonviolence, is completely out of touch with, the very lived reality of, it doesn't matter, like, for example, L'Oreal Sinigini, she was a Navajo woman who was murdered on the streets of Winslow, Arizona, back in 2016. She was not an activist. She didn't go to any protests. She was just trying to take care of her daughter. And, she was chased down. She was literally hunted down by a white cop. She's like
Wow.
100 and, 15 pounds, and, hunted down and shot and killed in broad daylight. So it doesn't matter. This gets back to a question, I asked you earlier, and you're basically saying like, I'm political by default by being black in America, which is totally true. It doesn't matter if you participate in these things. This system will find you because it's violent, right?
Yeah. Yep. Even I think even for me, just really thinking about all the levels that violence can manifest in, you know what I mean? Because I think for a long time, before I was, really interested in the text and in the history and doing the reading, I pretty much only thought about it from a brutality standpoint, like a very physical violence. But I mean, poverty is violent,
Mhm,
the way that bias exists in medicine, and the
mhm,
fact that black people are dying at higher rates, also indigenous people are dying at higher rates from COVID. Like that is inherently violent. Um so I think thinking about all the ways that folks are oppressed and how all of those systems manifest in violence in one way or another, even with because the tearing down of the statues, people are like, what is the point of this, what is the point of this? Those monuments to white supremacy, those are violent. Like
mhm.
that's violent. Folks should not have to see that. So yeah, so it's definitely protect yourself kind of energy coming from me, like in whatever way that folks need to do that in
Mm.
order to resist and to be safe. I'm all about it. I think there's a lot of tools in the revolutionary toolbox, and I feel like, nigga, if violence is one of them tools, like it is what it is. Those are my thoughts. Also, people don't want to hear that online either. I've tweeted something
Yeah,
like that before, and like, oh my god, people, they don't want to hear that.
yeah.
It's crazy. Like they're blowing out people's eyeballs at protests with like rubber bullets.
Right. And it's like you're concerned about what I'm saying, and the right of people for self-defense, but also like when I talk to folks about this, they always like, as if it's this like neat binary between violence and nonviolence, or even like self-defense. And it's like, I've seen you post about this, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about it, but like we consider self-defense like growing one's own food, like having food sovereignty, you
Yes,
know
yes.
having autonomy over what one puts in their body, because there's this kind of like liberal tendency to demonize people for their shopping habits, as if somebody has a choice to go to Walmart or to buy, live in a place where there's only canned food or food chock full of preservatives. Is like, they're poor, they don't have a choice. Like that's not a choice. Like this idea of like a free market or free choice is an act of violence, and it literally manifests in like the slow death of our people because we don't have the opportunity or the sovereignty over the land or over the kinds of foods that we're putting into our bodies.
Mhm.
But that's also not seen as like a form of like self-defense, because violence and self-defense is always seen as like a masculine thing. And caretaking or mutual aid is often seen as like less than or not equal to.
Yeah, no, yeah, totally, totally agree. I think that's really interesting to think about mutual aid as self-defense, survival programs as
Mm.
self-defense, especially from the land sovereignty and food piece. Like, oh man, recently I've been trying to. I don't have a green thumb, so I do struggle with that. I'm like I follow all these different urban agriculture accounts on Instagram and like these local farms, like specifically POC farming and shit. And I'm so in love with it, but I'm like, damn, I'm not. I need to figure that out because if we are gonna be able to self-sustain away from a capitalist empire, we will need to be able to grow and sustain ourselves. So through growing our own fruits and vegetables. But I'm trying to get to a place where that is like I don't know, it still seems so dreamy sometimes.
Yeah.
Like I think sometimes I'm still cynical about it. Like is this really, cuz even that, even if you do want to grow your own stuff, you still have to have your own land, which
Yep.
so many people like even me, I don't have it to have I couldn't just buy property right now like
Yeah.
that. Economically, so many folks are just not able to do that. So, I
I
read
think
some horrible statistic that I think like 5 white men own more rural land than like all of Black America.
Yep. That is an accurate statistic. And 95% of private landowners in the United States are white, right?
Wow.
So 95% of privately owned land in this country is owned by white people.
Mm.
And if you think about apartheid South Africa, 5% of, I think there was like 5% of the population was white, but they owned 70% of the land.
Wow.
So if people like want a comparison, like that's what we're living in. And I think that's another question that and this might be kind of out of the blue, but it's something I'm always confronting, especially in indigenous movements, when we say land, but we say land for whom, because Black folks have been categorically excluded from any kind of ownership of homes, ownership of land. But at the same time, it's like when we talk about land, like as indigenous folks, the white folks read it as like, oh, we only understand property based on exclusion, and Cheryl Harris has this really beautiful article called Whiteness as Property. And so they think that when indigenous people say, oh, we want the land back, that we're going to we're going to perform the same kind of property laws of private property against them and also against Black folks. And the idea, first of all, it's like Black and indigenous aren't mutually exclusive categories. Most Black people in this country have indigenous ancestry or indigenous themselves.
Facts.
And then also, like, why is it that this onus of land return gets put on indigenous people when we weren't the ones that created this problem in the first place? you
Yeah,
know
yeah, absolutely. I think about that sometimes too in terms of because I guess the whole thing is like this is indigenous land. Africans built the wealth of the country. And so those are the two things that need to be reckoned with. And sometimes I talk to folks and I really want to be better about my like international solidarity and just solidarity amongst other folks who suffer from oppression and whatever that means, any level of that. And I was talking to somebody, one of my homies who's Black, about like, building solidarity with indigenous communities and like fighting against the state alongside those communities. And I don't know, I kind of got some like pushback and I guess I get it, but their whole thing was like, well, so I mean, I want them to have, and maybe this was them thinking like with a, maybe a colonized mind, or thinking
Mm.
like a white person, but they were like, I definitely want them to get their land back, but so like, what's that gonna mean? Like, once they get their shit, they gonna kick us off, and we built this country, and I'm like, I don't think I don't think they're gonna just like you back to Africa. Like, I'm sure that something would be figured out. I don't think they would replicate the same violence of white supremacists, but I don't know. I just assume that that wouldn't happen. So it's nice to hear you say that that's not that's not what the plan is as
Well,
far as indigenous folks, being able to get the land back.
and this is the problem with, I think, this conversation is that it's mediated, like we're always trying to address our concerns to white man, right? And we're not having conversations as like as a class, but also as oppressed people, and like what that means. And so I found this like very interesting, like especially in like the environmental justice movement, is that Indians are like all over the place, like, oh, they're, they're the stewards and this and that. But and some, we internalize some of that. Like we want it, we want we want that kind of recognition, but it's the wrong kind of recognition, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Because I'm like, why aren't we organizing with like people in Atlanta about like land return and like housing? Housing is an environmental justice issue. Cops are an environmental justice issue. They are a
Fact.
toxin in the environment that leads to the premature death of Black folks and Indigenous folks. And when you start having that conversation, people get really uncomfortable. They're not, because then we fall outside of the bounds of like white expectation. And I've always had a problem with this. And there is internalized anti-Blackness within Indigenous communities. Let's be honest, like on the Trail of Tears, when they removed the Cherokee, the Creek, the Choctaw, and I'm missing one, Chickasaw, from the southeast, those nations, the so-called five civilized tribes, were also slave owning tribes, and they brought with them their their property in the form of African people.
Hmm.
And we have to have that conversation, and there's been a lot of work within those nations to address that, but at the same time there are still freedmen who who should be guaranteed citizenship within those tribes, but are disenfranchised.
Right.
And even within like my own family, like up north, our I believe it was my grandma for sure, but I don't. And her father was, I don't, her father's father was Black. And so we have this history of taking in, it's not like based on race. It's, it's about making kin. It's about making relations. That's what makes us Indigenous people, not race, not some kind of biology bullshit, or hypodescent as they call it. And this is something I've always talked about. Like even within the Black radical tradition, if you read Cedric Robinson, he begins the Black radical tradition with the formation of the Maroon Colony, which in many cases, was contingent upon alliances and solidarity and relationship making with Indigenous people of this hemisphere.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's hard with anti-blackness. It's so pervasive in everything.
Yeah.
It's hard. You'd be hard pressed to find any group of folks who don't have some level of anti-blackness. Unfortunately, that also can include Black communities as well in different
Mm,
places. But I think if those things are being addressed and brought to the table, and there's a level of acknowledgement, because that's what I mean, especially with abolition, like, isn't that supposed to be a part of the tenets of abolition? Is this like transformative justice and restorative justice process and work that, folks need to do? It's never gonna be this clean and easy, like, okay, cool. Let's just pretend that that didn't happen. Like, no, there's trauma that needs to be addressed, and there's restoration that is there and can happen with work. So I think it's all a part of the tradition of abolition. I feel like,
mm,
restoring those disrupted and quite frankly sometimes fucked up relationships, and building something new,
mm.
because I just think it's reductive to just continuously be in the the violence of the past. Like at a certain point, we have to bring that to the table and transcend it so we could like grow something better, you know? But yeah, I think anytime harm has been caused, it for sure needs to be talked about and unpacked. But I mean, folks, I'm sure there were a bunch of indigenous folks who were also allies to Africans and probably helping them to escape and do different things. I don't know. I don't know history well enough to know, but I just would assume that because I feel
Well,
like there's good people everywhere in
so
all communities.
yeah, and I think this has always been my contention with like these, because indigenous communities do it too, where they want to attach their narrative to the U.S. national narrative, right? To say, oh, I mean, this is true. It's not like it's false, but like the U.S. Constitution is based on the Iroquois, Confederacy, but except the Iroquois Confederacy didn't enslave people, or like wasn't imperialist or wasn't settler colonial. But they want to say like, oh, indigenous people are part of this kind of like fabric of liberal multiculturalism within
Mm,
the United States. And now you have people like, oh, some kind of teleology, or we were always on the path towards freedom and citizenship and being recognized by like our white brothers. And I feel like there's a similar narrative in Black America, especially like in electoral politics around this idea of a redeemable settler nation.
oh
um
God, yeah. Jesus
just watch
Christ.
the DNC.
A clip of Michelle Obama and
Oh
yeah,
my
yeah. It's I think that's the and maybe that's just speaks to the level of lack of proper education in in our American society because I think we don't learn real history and it makes it really difficult to have these kinds of conversations. I don't think most Americans would even consider this to be a settler colonial nation
yeah.
state. Even that term, I am new to even understanding and learning that term. Um, but yeah, there's just this. It's weird that there is this PR campaign that America has that really makes people believe it is something that can be redeemed or saved if we just we just buckle down and we get the right guy in office or the right black cop in office and everything everything will be all right. Yeah, I don't think that's the case. And when you say that, it's people they become pretty aggressive and they're like, "Well, what's the answer? So, okay, so what are we supposed to do then?"
Mm.
Like, if you have any sort of critique opposing electoral politics, but specifically the presidential election, if you oppose that, you're met with like a really visceral reaction of like, "Well, what do you want us to do? What are we supposed to do?" And I'm like, I don't have the answer to that.
Just tell them to vote harder.
Vote harder. So
Yeah.
what I know we do have there is the Green Party. Is it just that they don't get the level of funding? Like what is it? Because it's not like we only have two parties. Like
Yeah.
they're very socialist. I think they also the VP pick for them is this black woman, I believe.
Mm.
Um but yeah, no one talks about the other parties. Do you think it's just from a like, financial they don't have the same funding kind of thing?
Yeah, I think the way that the system is set up is it only really allows for two parties. I mean, even to get somebody on the ballot for a presidential ticket takes a lot of work, and you have to go, you need a large infrastructure to do it. And I think, that's a reason why, like, organizations like the Democratic Socialists of America haven't just formed their own party right now. And that's a whole nother story. But I also think that like the the idea of elections, especially presidential elections, like when people like get on me about, oh well, you're just telling people not to vote. I was like, I'm not telling anybody to do anything. Like if you want to actually change something, then like put all that pressure on the electoral college. Like we don't even have direct democracy in
Right,
this country.
right.
And the reason why we don't have direct democracy in this country is because they wanted to disenfranchise black voters, through the electoral college. Like that's pure
And
and
they
simple.
succeeded. Yep.
And so when everyone talks about like, like you have to vote and all, sure, okay, whatever, but that's the people who do that, most often don't, that's the least that they do, like there's
As far
all
as
the,
being political, like exercising their politics in real
yeah,
time. Yeah, definitely, definitely.
yeah. And so like my contention is like, we should, I'm a historian, and so I'm like, we need to create the histories that prove, that this isn't, this country wasn't inevitable, that it's not, that settler colonialism, the enslavement of African people was not an inevitable historical phenomenon. So in 1526, we're talking about, we learned about Columbus, we learned about all this other stuff, but in 1526, the first settlement, the first European Spanish settlement in what became the United States was overthrown by the enslaved African and enslaved indigenous Caribbean people that they brought in to, create the first slave plantation in the U.S. in what is now known as, South Carolina. And they allied with indigenous people that, that were called the Guales at the time. They learned to speak with each other. They learned to, communicate, and they created the first free, settlement, so to speak, our first free community after kicking out the Spanish, after wiping them out,
Oh
chasing
wow.
them off yeah, this 1526. And, African people became the first permanent non-indigenous inhabitants of Turtle Island, not European settlers. And why don't we remember, that history as the
Wow, I never
foundation
knew
of,
that.
yeah, that's the beginning of class struggle. That's the beginning of anti-colonial struggle and anti-colonial resistance and what became the United States.
Hmm.
And that, I think that's where we need to, really begin, when we have these conversations. And even the idea, a lot of folks, like, again, I'm not against voting, whatever, but I see this level to like, oh, your ancestors died for the right. And I was like, Crazy Horse didn't, fight.
Oh god, I hate that. Oh, I hate that so much. Yeah, yeah, and I mean, that's a hard one because even, like, my granny will hit me with that,
Yeah.
and what can I say to my grandmother who lived through the civil rights era, you know what I mean? And really saw a level of racism that I've never even seen in my
Mm,
lifetime. So yeah, no, that one is that one is hard. I'm like, Granny, I love you so much. I'm still not gonna vote, but I will vote in my local elections.
yeah.
I do believe that I need to be more aware of how my specific community is governed and
Mm,
community surrounding mine because I don't like the people who like the city planners and stuff like that. I think it's really important that I know those things, and I've been pretty bad about that. So that I want to get better at. But I was gonna say, can I ask you a question?
sure.
So you being an educator and a historian, I'm just wondering, knowing that history is erased and rewritten, how do you think folks can usher in like a mainstream
Mm,
political education? Because I feel I've just been thinking about it with book club and like book club isn't really mainstream, but it is like the closest thing that I've seen of
mm,
something that could maybe do that, and even that's not really what we do, you know? Like we do pick books that are pretty political, but we also pick like poetry and, short stories, novels, that kind of thing. So I don't know, I've been thinking a lot about it. Like I wish there was some sort of an apparatus that could like really usher in political education into a pop culture context, like a mainstream context. Um, I felt like hip hop kind of was doing that a little bit back in
mm.
the day, but even still, it wasn't like, you know, we need like classes, like a 6 week course. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Well, I think, like, so first of all, I'll say, like, I think the book club is that. Um, and second of all, I think about this in terms of music. Like, if we think about, somebody like, let's just pick a vile person like Garth Brooks. He's hella popular. Like, he's
Right,
got like
right.
mainstream recognition. And oftentimes, like, I used to be in a lot of indie bands growing up, like garage bands, things like that, and like it was never popular, it wasn't cool to be popular like Garth Brooks, and what would happen in that kind of like indie music scene is we would all like kind of snipe at each other and this and that. And I feel like that kind of represents some of the culture on the left a little bit, is that like,
Mm.
they don't want, they're afraid of mainstream, they're afraid of popularity. And there's a difference between being a celebrity and then just being like, like being part of a popular movement and a popular kind of like program of struggle. And I think of like, Comrade Fidel Castro during the special period when, the Soviet Union collapsed, and they were the main trading partner to Cuba, who had been, under these like genocidal sanctions by the United States, still is under those genocidal sanctions. And they were confronted with a really like daunting task. And their goal was never to fight the United States government, to like in an offensive battle. It was always self-defense. And
Right.
so they have a population that's like starving. And so they implement these like, island wide, farm programs and all of these other things, but it's forward facing. The Cuban project, the forward facing project was what Fidel Castro called the battle of ideas, that we have to fight, for the principles of socialism and decolonization in all aspects, whether it's the culture realm, if you're making music, if you're an artist, if you're making film. Cuba has like a really kind of amazing film school. They trained a lot of revolutionaries from Africa and, all over the world. Um, whether it's in like me being an academic or an educator, but the goal is not to just like fight for marginalization or fight for the broom closet. The goal is to actually make these, this is the truth. Like like Amilcar Cabral said, claim no easy or tell no lies and claim no easy victories. I'm not out here like lying about, this socialist project or this left movement or this decolonization project. I'm telling the truth. Like, but
Right.
the goal is to make it mainstream. And I feel like sometimes people are afraid of that popularity, but I didn't get into this to, and I'm not like trying to like, I'm not trying to be a celebrity. I don't want to be a celebrity. These ideas are more important. That's what I'm concerned about.
It's hard. It's hard because it becomes that regardless, you know.
Yeah.
People just even with like how you said, like, you saw my account and thought that I just was a person on Twitter. So, so many people just think that, and it's
I
like,
thought you were more than that, but but
but but I mean, you know what I mean. You know what I
yeah,
mean.
yeah.
Like it because because of I don't know. We haven't had a moment of really breaking down celebrity culture and
Mm,
idolization that is immediately replicated in anything. Like, even if you are just talking politics but people like what you say, they will hoist you up to be um like almost like the spokesperson for the left or whatever. And
mm,
I even did it initially early on with Angela Davis and being like, why don't everybody needs to be listening to Angela Davis. We got to like really not deifying her, but definitely like, she should be listened to. She is
mhm,
one of the ones that this important figure. And, you know, obviously now we see some of the things that she's been saying and doesn't match some of the other things that she has said in the past
yeah.
previously, and folks are kind of like it I think brings up a lot of confusion and anger in people, and I think that happens because of celebrity,
Mm,
because we have this sort of culture that folks can't just say things or change their mind, and that just be like, okay, you're just another person in the world who changed their mind, like it's whatever. Like, that shouldn't derail the conversation to what we need to be focusing on in terms of liberation. But
mm,
it does. Even some of the things that I've said, I see how the focus just it becomes something else. And I think that's why I was asking you, because I kind of want to take a step back, and I'm trying to figure out how to navigate
mm,
still pushing my ideas forward, because I see that people are engaging with them and I think it's important. And folks have told me like, yo, you being on this journey has helped me
mm,
become radicalized, and I'm reading different things and thinking about things differently, but I'm seeing my platform expand and grow in a way that, like, I didn't even want it to get to this point on making music. Like,
mm,
I specifically kept my career very underground on purpose because I did not want to be a celebrity.
mm.
Um so yeah, I haven't figured that out. I haven't figured that out. Um And yeah, I don't even know if it's possible.
Yeah, that
Um,
was actually a question that I had because it seems, it seems to me that you're refuting that celebrity culture for those very reasons. I mean, it's toxic. I mean, even, even the
sick.
so-called, yeah, and the even like even claiming to read books and then being like harped on by people for being, smart, and then you wrote that song and it became this whole thing, and it was like people were more obsessed with the spectacle of it than like the actual content of what you were saying, and like what you were saying was
Definitely.
actually really profound.
Yeah, that whole J. Cole thing ended up being pretty trash only because I specifically tried to make every line in that song very intentional,
Mm,
and it still didn't matter. The response itself became the spectacle. And it didn't matter. And I think that's like that's going to be harder to dismantle because that's so embedded into American culture.
mm,
Um I think that we probably won't see something like that being unhinged until we are literally abolishing the empire itself. And even then, I mean, people idolize Jesus. Maybe that's just a part of humanity. Like
mm,
maybe that's just natural to humans as we find that one person in the tribe or the community who is, powerful or wise or talented in some way that we're not, and we praise it. We
mm.
we, we praise it. Um, yeah, yeah. I
I,
don't know.
I don't know though. Like because I struggle with this too because like I really solidified my politics like when somebody like Evo Morales became president. I was like, holy shit, that guy looks like my uncle. Believe
Yeah,
me, like he has the same haircut.
he's so cute.
He
Yeah,
is.
yeah.
and but he it's not like this. I don't think he's a perfect human being, and that's like, I mean, that's like Michelle Obama's defense of fucking Biden. He's like, he's not perfect, but who is? It's like, that's not a defense. Like, innocence is the weakest defense, as Leonard Peltier once said. it's
Hmm.
it's what Evo Morales represented to me, like, in the fact that he was a poor coca farmer from this peasant community. You know, several of his siblings died because of malnutrition. He became, he was illiterate. He's seen as a stupid Indian. He never, went to formal educate. He never went to any formal college, but then became a president.
Yeah,
And he really represented the aspirations. I see that the same with like Hugo Chavez and others, and I don't like deify them. They're human beings, but like it's the life that they live and what they represent
yeah. The principles. Yeah,
yeah, and that's why I'm always like, like Sherman Alexie, who was a very famous native writer. He was
yeah.
outed,
Read
for
him in
being,
high school.
yeah. So you've read him before. He actually said, "Never meet your heroes because you will be thoroughly disappointed." And he was outed as like this horrible, serial sexual abuser. So like,
Oh, word! I did not know
yeah,
that. Oh no.
yep. So
Jeez. Gotta throw him in the bin with Cosby.
yeah,
That's
I,
horrible.
I don't think it was quite as serious as Cosby, but it was definitely like a pattern of abuse and using his celebrity to take advantage of, especially young native writers.
Oh, okay. Wow.
But
Damn.
yeah,
Yeah, no,
something.
I mean, yeah, no, that's another thing. I mean, we probably don't have enough time to get into patriarchy, but
No, I mean, I think that's a good place to go because I see a lot of the things that the attacks on you as being part of a general kind of culture of misogyny, and how do you deal with that? Like how is it, like you can do all these things, you can do the book club, you can be this very prolific thinker online, whether you like that or not. That's how I engaged you, and I see you as a legitimate thinker. But then all of that gets thrown out because somebody's like, oh, she reads books.
I know. I know. I'm like, damn. Like, I feel like there's already such a like a smear campaign on Black people, specifically Black Americans in
Mm,
reading because of the history of how Africans were treated during chattel slavery and stuff. So reading is a very specific and nuanced thing in
Mm,
the Black community. But yeah, I don't know why he would say that. when like I was just thinking about like all the little Black boys who probably follow his account who already were thinking reading isn't cool.
mm,
Um, and now that's solidified for sure. Like, oh, that shit lame as hell. Like, I think a
mm,
part of why I like book club and the work of it is like I'm really trying to make it look not cool, but like, at least inviting and not elitist.
mm,
Like we try to, I even with the branding, the color palettes and shit that I was using, I really want people to just feel comfortable because that's the thing that I'm probably the most insecure about in my life. I struggle with reading my entire life. I barely graduated high school. So for these statements to come out as if I'm this like, scholarly person, I struggle with all of the texts that I read very
mm,
publicly. Um and I think that's a part of the work. I I think it doesn't matter if I'm good at reading or not. I know that if I want to be the type of community member that I need to be, I can't be speaking from a place of ignorance on such a large
mm,
platform of ignorance, excuse me. Um, so that's why I try, but the patriarchy thing has been interesting only because we've seen it play out um in hip hop over the past couple months. I don't know what it is about this quarantine, but the way women um rappers specifically have been treated has been pretty terrible. And I think certain things like that aren't an, with the J. Cole situation, I don't think those things are typically read as misogynist because, there's coded language like queen and, you so smart, da da da.
mm,
So I think people are like, oh, that's not patriarchy, that's not misogynist. Um, and I don't know that we're able to have conversations that are a bit more complicated. Like you don't have to be smacking a woman across the face to not see that person as your equal.
mm,
Um, but yeah, but there literally has been so many moments, specifically with like Megan Thee Stallion, of just like outright, just like brutal violence. And it's weird that it seems like a very insular conversation that ends up being had around it. Like she's one of the biggest stars that's out right now, but I don't really see like mainstream media talking about it. It's more so like I think it's just Twitter conversations, like social media conversations, but I don't know that like MTV or,
mm,
ABC, like if it were like Taylor Swift or something. Not to say that Megan is as big as Taylor Swift, but I feel like it would be more of a discussion. Like
mm,
like she was shot in both of her feet. Like it was gun violence. I don't know. And maybe that's just more so specific to like maybe it's just a cultural thing on some hip hop shit. Maybe it's up to us to have those conversations on our media platforms, which, we do, but I just feel like if these are pop artists who are in the mainstream, they're consumed by like white audiences more
mm,
so than anything, and it doesn't get addressed. So yeah, and yeah, with the transphobia, I think that's been the worst part about this whole moment and how many people, specifically like gender nonconforming trans folks, are literally day in day out putting their bodies on the line.
mm,
And any level of conversation around transphobia, misogynoir, patriarchy, it's like that's secondary. The state is killing us. We could talk about that later. We need to address like police brutality right here, right now.
mm,
I just wish we could have space for both.
mm,
Because I was watching, I think it was this video. What is her name? Oh, I'm forgetting her name. This trans activist, she's so amazing. But she basically was saying like, what sense does it make if we completely eradicate these types of violences in our communities, like state violence, and I
Mm,
come home and I'm killed by someone in my community, you
mm,
know? So I just have been thinking about that a lot and thinking about how I can like learn more about trans struggles and different resistance movements that LGBTQ folks have led throughout history. We read Captive Genders for book club, and that was
mm,
really informative, even in terms of just thinking about how trans embodiment is criminalized by the state. And, I didn't even know that representing yourself in the gender that you've decided that you want to be from like a clothing standpoint, you can be met with more violence from COs and
mm.
from other folks who are incarcerated, and you can get more time for doing like just for dressing how you want to present is crazy to me, like that level of patriarchy. Um,
And also, just I'm not trying to correct you, but there's also like, some of this isn't just a decision, it's who they are, and so like that's the
oh
expression.
yeah, sorry,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
I mean, I'm not saying that that's what you said, but that's it's not like one just decides that they're going to be this someday. It's who they are, and like what you're saying is it's like these carceral institutions just become like literally just eviscerating their identity. And I'm not saying like this identity is like chosen, it's actually who they are. It's preventing them from being a human
being
being.
exactly who they are. Yeah, yeah. Sorry, I miss said that. I'm also still new to learning correct language. I definitely grew up probably probably damn near transphobic. I'm not gonna lie. Like I
Yeah,
grew up in the hood and I
yeah.
wasn't exposed to certain ideas. And I didn't even think I had any of that in me because I've always been a pretty open person, but it's so like the heteronormative way of thinking is so
Mhm.
just ingrained in you. Um, it's like you really have to fucking scrub
Yeah.
that shit out of you. Daily work and a daily process. But yeah, yeah, I would love to see patriarchy fall along with all these other systems. I think, especially like thinking about white supremacy and capitalism, those things are I think all those things play hand in hand with patriarchy as well. So I don't know how we'll be able to take any of those things down if we don't also take down patriarchy.
Mm.
So
Yeah, I
yeah,
think
I don't see it.
I just have like a final question, but I also just want to reflect on some of the things that you said, especially around reading. And what really got me, like what solidified it in my mind, was it was like, this idea that this anti-intellectualism is just a settler kind of colonial mentality, right? And I was in Palestine, and I met this person who's probably going to be a lifelong friend of mine who told me about growing up, and he grew up with three books on his shelf. One was the Quran, one was a book by Marx, and one was the selected writings from Lenin. And he, when the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, would come and harass them, his mom, who was a devout Muslim woman, would hide would take the Marx and Engel, or excuse me, the Marx and Lenin books, put them in a bag, and then bury them out back.
Wow.
And so like they, because when the IDF soldiers would come in, they didn't care about the Quran, but they cared about Marx and Lenin being on on their shelves.
Right.
And like these folks, like that, like education wasn't just some kind of like privilege, or like, oh, who has time to do that. It was about revolutionary like theory about who they were as Palestinians, versus they saw themselves as like engaging in class struggle. And that's dangerous. Like that's dangerous for folks. The MST, the landless workers movement in Brazil right now, is like their main kind of like bread and butter, besides growing their own food and creating these these little colonies, not the bad kind of colonies, the good kind of colonies. um, where they're given like factory workers who had been expelled from factories, et cetera, land and places to live, and to live in sustainable communities. One of the things that they're most known about is their political education programs, and like the success of those. And that's what represents the threat to the Brazilian state, is that they're training like generations of revolutionaries, and they're reading Marx and Engels. They're reading, people part of the Black radical tradition. Like they're reading them and discussing them. They even have like a youth caucus, like with almost 1 million children who are involved in it. Like they don't fuck around.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was thinking about that, and then just like just reflecting on what you're saying is that these this isn't something that I take lightly, and a lot of folks don't. And we should remember that, like even the Black Panther parties, to be part of the cadre, some of them had to read 2 hours a day. They had to sit down and read the party paper, but then also read political education materials so that they could go out and talk to people about, what's happening, not just in their communities, but also in the world.
Yeah, Fred Hampton talks about that all the time.
Mm,
There's a pretty popular video of him talking about he's like, before you can even run our politics and go out and speak on behalf of the party, you have to go through our 6-week political education program.
mm,
Which I think about that a lot. And sometimes I get in a space of thinking that that's not enough, or that I'm not really putting in the work that I need to be putting in, because it's not meeting the material needs of folks right now.
mm,
Like I do believe political education is incredibly important, but sometimes I do feel like I'm not doing enough, because I'm not feeding houseless folks. I'm not organizing around the material needs of like, I mean, we do send books to incarcerated folks, but I don't know if that makes sense. But I think that's where a lot of my um, anxiety comes around, because I think folks see me as a fraud because I don't do that. Um, Although we do like financially support several different mutual aid projects across the country, we don't have our own. So I'm like, I don't even know why I just went on that tangent,
well,
but
no, if you don't mind, like I don't actually know your age, but this is like a generational thing where it's like
I'm
there's this.
28. I'm
Oh, you're
28.
28, so you're like 6 years. Like I don't know what I'm not good at the generation like Z, B, or whatever they are, but it's you're afflicted by what a lot of young people, including myself, had like this idea of imposter syndrome. And I think my personal opinion, if you, this is my unsolicited advice, is that I think that's total
Please.
that's total bullshit. And like you are doing a necessary good. Like again, like I said, I didn't hear about you until I engaged your political work online and the book club, and you're reaching so many people. And like imagine yourself as a young person who needed something like this to crystallize and to make sense of the world that we're living through right now. We can, how many young folks are in the street, for seeing a police officer for the first time in riot gear, or getting tear gassed, or getting, that's their experience. That's what they're going through right now. And we need all elements of it. We need the food stuff, we need the mutual aid work, we need the caretaking work, we need the political education work. And we can't do it all, like, and there shouldn't be expected upon all of us doing it. But you've created something, an institution that'll hopefully sustain itself and carry forward that educational project. And so I would say, like, you're actually doing the opposite. You're actually contributing to that struggle on the ground, and you uplift a lot of mutual aid projects that I've seen. And I would disagree with you, is what I'm trying to say.
But at least,
Respectfully.
I mean, you understand where the sentiment, where that
Yeah,
feeling can come from. Yeah.
yeah.
Um, yeah. But thank you for saying that, because I definitely can, especially with the whole, like, celebrity. I think it's natural for people to automatically just assume you're doing anything you do for attention.
Hmm.
Um, and like, I don't know if you've heard the term clout chasing.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know, how old is 36? Is that, you should, yeah, you know what clout chasing is. But yeah, people have accused me of that just by like taking pictures with books.
Yeah.
I take a lot of selfies with books, and they're like, she's clout chasing, she's clout chasing. I'm like, nigga, what? I don't make any money from promoting other people's books. I don't make a dime.
Clout chasing with scientific socialism
With
and
the,
black anarchism.
with the George Jackson book, I'm
Yeah.
trying to chase, yeah, with Asada, yeah.
Yeah.
but so so it goes. I had to take your word and just remember that it is all a part of the the larger project of liberation.
Mm.
Everybody has their place. Everybody does have their place.
So I have the final question, and this is just based on a tweet that you sent out in
Uh
listing interests 6 days ago. Scientific socialism, black anarchism, Pan Africanism, strawberries, weed, and sex.
oh. No, yeah, no, highly, especially the last one with this quarantine. It's been a
Yeah.
drought. I will tell you that it has been a drought. But really, really getting into anarchism.
Mm.
I've been reading some Zoe Zamuzi. She's a
Yep.
writer. Um, incredible. Been reading her
As
work.
as
Oh no,
black as resistance. Is that
as Black is
yeah,
Resistant. Yeah, we picked that for book
amazing book.
club. Incredible. I because we picked so many books. I'm not gonna lie to you. I don't always finish all of them. But hers because she co-wrote that with William, I think William Smith. Um, but yeah, so I didn't finish that one immediately, but I've recently been going back to it, and I think just the idea of blackness as being naturally anarchic
Mm.
is so powerful, and um, also just thinking about stepping away from um, the idea that we need specific types of governance in order to exist as living creatures.
Mm.
I just find it fascinating. I haven't picked a home. Like I don't know
Mm.
if I'm at first I kind of was because I felt like people were like pushing me to. So I was like, I'm a communist, but
Mhm.
I don't really know what I am. I just
Mhm.
know that I am interested in a lot of things that I'm reading about. And I'm probably gonna keep reading something and I'll immediately be like, oh my God, I'm so into this right now. Like that's happened like 4 times. So
Ha
I'm sure it'll keep happening.
have you
But
read, Saidiya Hartman's Wayward Lives?
no, no, I've
Oh
been
my
afraid
god.
of reading that. I'm really
What?
afraid of theory. Like I,
It's not
I want to read your book too, and I'm like,
No,
oh,
it's not there's no theory in it. That's the beautiful thing
I'm
about it
so
is that,
afraid.
like, Saidiya Hartman is, like I wanna be, like not I don't wanna be Saidiya Hartman, but I wish that I had the chops that she does to convey the complexities of theory without employing theoretical language, like in the like these $10 words. She it's like literally just a like on the ground kind of survey of like the so-called ghetto and like how black life organizes itself in these like intimate kind of moments of it's very it's like reading a novel, right?
Hmm.
and
Okay.
and it's and I try not to read. I didn't write my book like terribly theoretical, to the chagrin of my colleagues, but I don't really care. I didn't write it for them. I wrote it for everyday people just to pick up the book and learn the story and the history. But if you're into black anarchism, like Saidiya Hartman is like this book like crystallizes all of that. She kind of through actual people's lives, talks about black anarchy and why it is such a threat to the status quo, and like what does it mean for people to live in places that aren't supposed to be livable but then make life out of it. And it's very
Hmm.
beautiful. I taught it for one of my courses, and I just couldn't. I just like melt every time I read her writing. I'm just like, oh my god, this is so good.
Oh man, that's so dope. Yeah, a couple people have suggested it, and I definitely was. It's in the queue for book club, um, for 2021. So okay, that's good to know. That's exciting because I've definitely been like, ooh, even with I ordered Black Marxism, and I've been like trying so hard, but I literally was like bitching online the other day, like I don't, I might not be smart enough for theory. Like it might not be in the cards for me. Because that is intense. That book is yikes. That's
It's
yeah,
dense.
it's
Yeah,
dense. It's crazy.
it's
I'm
not
like,
something you like
do
pick
people's
up
brains
and
even like think like this in real time? There's no way that this man's brain actually thinks like this. It's insane.
Yeah, he it's an intense book. It's not something you pick up and read right before you go to bed.
Oh God, no. No, no, no. Yeah, no, it takes me a while to get through like 3 pages. I'm definitely like taking mad notes, and the Google is right there to look up every other word.
Yeah.
um but yeah, again, that's what I was saying earlier as far as like it's work. I think it is work, but it's important. So that's amazing that Sadia is able to kind of alleviate some of that um that fear in
Mm,
folks by just writing in accessible language. That's beautiful.
mm.
That's
And it's
incredible. Yeah.
and it's not like, it's not that she's not theoretically rigorous. She is very theoretically rigorous, but it's accessible. It's not so much about accessibility as it is like it's approachable. It's not. You can read it various ways. As an academic, you can turn to the back and read all the citations that she's doing, and the theoretical work. Or if you're just more interested in the stories, you can just read. And you can. And the beautiful thing about the book is that it's non-linear, so you can literally turn to any page and begin at any section, and the book will still make sense, no matter what order you read it
Oh,
in.
I love that. That's
Yeah,
incredible.
it's really beautiful. But
Would
the
you
last, oh
would you want to pick a book for book club?
yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah, you should. You should. Um, maybe for well, I'll probably DM you. This is a private
Yeah,
conversation.
yeah,
I did
yeah.
want to publicly ask you just to force you to say yes. So
No, it's all right.
I
I agree.
yeah.
So I guess the last question, just maybe some closing thoughts on, Pan-Africanism and scientific socialism, because I've seen, just following the work in the book club, and those are topics you get into, online, but in some of the discussions as well, and just, your thoughts on it, because I think the Pan African tradition itself has probably advanced the idea of socialism more so than any other kind of political a tradition. And I think a lot of people who are socialists or consider themselves socialists wouldn't necessarily think that.
Yeah, yeah. I'm still really new to it. You probably are like extremely advanced. It is something that I'm wanting to learn more about, but it just in terms of the small things that I've been seeing as far as like communalism and
Mm,
just cooperative ownership and uh building building that solidarity between Black folks across the diaspora is just really crucial to me right now. I think just the international solidarity,
mm,
I want to strengthen that and become more tapped in with struggles in different parts of the world, like resistance struggles that Black folks are leading and and pushing to the fore. So yeah, I think in terms of that, as far as scientific socialism, I I haven't really read like traditional, like I haven't really read like Marx and Lenin, and I don't really understand dialectical materialism. I'm not
mhm.
gonna lie to you. I've tried. It's one of those things where I'm like, again, I might not be smart enough to understand this just right now. I will come back to it. Um, but I do understand that I think it's it for me it makes sense that we would live in a more communal way, and
Mm,
that we would that there wouldn't be a singular boss, that we would live in socialism, and
mhm,
we would all be um we would have equal share of the work that we're contributing, and also just like finding like human value and dignity in the work that we do. I think we've gotten so far away from that. So from those, I don't know if those even really speak to exactly what scientific socialism and Pan-Africanism, like the true core tenets of what those things are, but like just me on the outskirts being like, "Ooh, I want to read more about it." That's what is driving me towards it, if
mm,
that makes sense. Um, but yeah, no, I haven't really. I've more so read other people who have written about Marxism,
mm.
if that makes sense. Like I
Yeah.
haven't really sat down and just read like what's the manifesto?
Yeah, Communist Manifesto.
The Communist Manifesto, yeah. So I'm a fraud. Everyone knows I'm a fraud.
No, that's not true. Well, I think
Met a
like
lot of black people who've read a lot of that.
yeah. I mean, like it's important too, but I also think that like the Black radical tradition in it and the incorporation of Marxism within to that tradition like makes sense for that experience, that historical experience. And I think even like somebody like Walter Rodney, he's so insightful in many different ways, but is very committed to the Marxist method and all scientific socialism. And I'd make one recommendation, to really clarify like, the things that it was clarified for me after reading the South the South African Marxist text called Dialego, and I can send you the link. It's on Marxist.com or Marxist.org. Uh,
Dialego?
yeah,
Dialego.
Dialego, like Dialego,
Okay.
and we actually teach it in the Red Nation Marxism 101 practice school, and it like dialectical materialism. Like I've watched those YouTube videos. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? And I'm an academic, and we train like with the theory stuff, but basically what it is the way we explain it to folks who because they're not academics, they're just people who want to learn. They're native people who want to learn about this stuff. And dialectical materialism is the understanding that all things change, right? That's the dialectical part.
Okay.
Change is constant. Materialism is like the objective reality that we live in, right? So dialectical materialism from a revolutionary Marxist standpoint is like, what are the objective conditions that we live in a society to achieve change, right? That's the essence of
Mhm.
it. And if you want to get more involved and like advanced in that stuff, that's cool, but that's basically what you need to know is like, for the United States, the objective conditions are structured by and white supremacy and settler colonialism. Those are the objective conditions that are the foundation for US capitalism. So if we want to achieve change, we have to overthrow those two systems, right? That's kind of like an example of the things that we talk about. And that's kind of abstract, but you kind of get what I'm saying here.
Yeah, yeah. What are the objective conditions that we live in what are the objective conditions that we live in a society to create change?
Yeah. So like
Okay.
what prevents that change? Like the cops, and what is the nature of the cops? What do they actually like? What is their function? And Lenin does a really good critique of the state in State and Revolution, where he talks about police, really just maintaining the oppression of whether it's colonized people or working class folks, and the rule of the ruling class. And so you have to address the role of the police in any revolutionary struggle. Yeah, so like we could go on and on, but I don't want to like lecture you. Or, like,
No, no, I'm like, man, that's what I need. Like, I wish I, that's what I was saying, I wish I would have went to college because I just need someone to talk at me
yeah.
so I can just consume. Because I learn more like this. And I was going through your podcast before this interview.
Hmm.
And I was like, oh my God, I really have to listen to all of these. They're so good. Um, that is, I think, just in terms of education, probably one of my favorite things right now is just like listening to podcasts and listening to academics talk and lecture, especially with
Mm.
this, oh my God, like the
Mm.
Zoom era that we're in right now just
Mm.
because of COVID. It is annoying. It's really annoying. I'm so happy that this was not a Zoom call. But those are super great for breaking down these like really dense terminologies. Yeah, because I wouldn't have pieced that together off of what I was reading. Walter Rodney has this one essay that I read the other day that kind of broke it down.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, this helped me a lot. I just wrote this down on a notebook. We'll be looking this up later.
Well, maybe the next time I invite you on the show, we can have a whole conversation talking about Dialego, breaking it down.
Yes, yeah, yeah. I'm definitely about to look up that book.
Yeah,
Um,
it's just like it's a long essay, but it's written from the context of like understanding the colonial state and racial apartheid in South Africa. It's really beautiful.
ooh,
It's very well written and very well argued.
amazing. Okay. We might pick it. We do. We just launched this free reading program, and we pick one essay a month. So
Mm.
we might pick this if it's not too long.
It's we teach it in like we teach one part of it, but I think it could be taught in two parts because the two essays are pretty long. But
Oh, it is okay. Well,
yeah,
that makes sense. That makes sense.
but
Um, but yeah, thank you for even requesting me and asking me to be a part of this. I know it was so impromptu, just through a Twitter interaction.
yeah.
This was really nice.
This is our generation. This is how this is why I love social media is like more so making the connections versus like getting involved in the drama and like the politics of it because
Mhm.
I've learned so much just by following. That's where I get my news. I don't,
Same, same.
it's how I stay up to date in the world. And also understand that it's a realm that's not, it's geared towards profit making. Right. And so I'm not confused about the algorithms on my feed and like the spicy stuff, like why some of it gets promoted and re-liked and reshared and why some of it doesn't, but at the same time there's a beautiful community online, that I have a lot of respect for, yourself included, people I follow and get my news from. So
Same, same. Definitely have been ghost following you for
goes on.
a long time. Definitely learn a lot from your platform. Yeah, I probably wouldn't have gotten to this point in my journey, you know, without it. At least not right now. So I hate to say it, it is a white supremacist app, but I'm
Yeah.
grateful for Twitter. I am grateful for it. And being an artist, like being an independent artist, I needed it. That was like my bread and butter as far as promotion. Social media is it's a tool. It is a tool.
Well, thanks so much, Fatima, for joining us. Real quickly, can you just let folks know where to find your work and the book club that you run? There's a YouTube channel. You can give folks that. We'll also put it in the show notes.
Yeah, yeah. So the quickest way to find links to everything would just be to visit our website. And it's www.nonamebooks.com. Also, as soon as I said www, I was like, oh my God, I'm so old. No one says that.
HTTP
It's not necessary.
colon backslash backslash.
I don't No Name Books, yeah, nonamebooks.com. And you'll find like links to our YouTube, our Twitter, and our Instagram page as well. So yeah. And our Patreon, if people wanted to support us with $1 a month, that would be beautiful. And you can do that through our website too.